A cold morning market where everything felt just a little too quiet. And a sign that read, Mother Dog and Pups, Clearance. A veteran Navy SEAL came only for tools and supplies, not knowing something there was waiting for him. His K9 stopped without a sound, eyes locked on a weak mother dog guarding her trembling puppies. No barking, no struggle. Just a look that felt like a question no one else could hear. People passed by, pricing lives like broken items. But he couldn't walk away. So he made a simple choice. Take them all, not knowing what that decision would cost him. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories. Morning in the northern edge of town did not arrive gently. It came like a blade of pale light sliding across everything at once, frozen mud hardened into uneven ridges, thin frost clinging to the roadside grass, gray tarps snapping sharply in the wind, like tired flags refusing to fall. The makeshift winter exchange market had gathered overnight at the edge of the pine forest. A crooked crescent of folding tables, rusted tools, old blankets, and people who looked like they were buying time more than goods. Caleb Vance parked his truck just beyond the gravel lot and let the engine die slowly. He didn't move right away. At 43, Caleb carried himself with the quiet precision of someone who had spent too many years in places where hesitation could cost more than comfort. He stood about 6'1", broad-shouldered, lean but solid. The kind of strength built from repetition rather than display. His face was angular, the lines sharp and defined. His jaw marked by a faint, unshaven beard that never quite grew thick. His hair, dark brown, cut short in a military style, showed early threads of silver along the temples, like frost settling before its time. His eyes were what people remembered. Blue-gray, steady, always watching, not searching for trouble, just never surprised when it found him. He stepped out, boots crunching lightly against the frost. His olive field jacket sat worn but dependable across his shoulders. The red and dark blue plaid shirt beneath it, buttoned to the collar against the cold. Cargo pants, boots, old military watch, knife at his side, and the familiar weight of his Eberle-stock half-track backpack. It was less an outfit than a continuation of who he was. Beside him, Orion moved. The German Shepherd K9 was about 5 to 6 years old, a perfect balance of muscle and control. His black and tan coat was dense and healthy, his posture grounded, his movements efficient. His eyes, dark, focused, unwavering, scanned without panic. Orion did not react to everything, only to what mattered. Caleb came for hinges, wire, feed, nothing more. He had learned to keep his life small on purpose. The market breathed in low, tired rhythms. Boots shifting over gravel, quiet negotiations, the dull metallic clink of tools changing hands. People nodded to Caleb. He nodded back. Known enough to be recognized. Distant enough to be left alone. That suited him. Until Orion stopped. Not hesitation. Not confusion. A full stop. The leash slackened, but the dog did not move. His body went still. Ears forward, head slightly lowered, eyes locked onto something ahead. Caleb followed his gaze. Behind an old refrigerated truck parked near the abandoned rail line, a small enclosure had been built. It wasn't proper. Just wire panels held together by rope and scrap metal, leaning slightly like it might collapse if the wind decided to care enough. Inside stood a German Shepherd mother and 3 puppies. The mother was thin, not skeletal, but worn. Her frame still strong beneath it all, but dulled by use. Her coat was black and tan, though faded, the richness drained by time and neglect. Around her neck, the fur thinned unnaturally, a faint ridge of hardened skin beneath it hinting at long-term pressure. Collar, restraint, something worse. Her eyes were amber, not dull. Not empty, just withdrawn. like hope had become something too expensive to spend. The puppies huddled close. One pressed against her front leg, seeking warmth. Another lay curled into her side. The smallest trembled, its oversized paws awkward beneath a body not ready for the cold world it had been born into. A piece of cardboard hung crookedly from the pen. Mother dog plus pups. Clearance. Clearance. The word landed wrong. Caleb had seen loud cruelty, war, chaos, men shouting, explosions ripping through silence. But this quiet kind, this transactional stripping of life into something cheap and manageable, pressed deeper. It didn't scream. It justified. A man stood beside the pen, holding a styrofoam cup. Dwayne Kessler. Late 40s, thick through the shoulders but softened by time and comfort. His skin was weathered, uneven, his nose slightly flattened as if broken once and never corrected. His hair sat in uneven patches, and his eyes carried the dull patience of someone who had learned to reduce everything, people, animals, decisions, into profit and loss. "You buying or just staring?" he asked. Caleb didn't look at him immediately. "How much?" Dwayne named a number, low. Too low. Not a price. A dismissal. Caleb reached into his pocket without hesitation. "For all of them." Dwayne paused, not surprised, calculating. "Well," he muttered, taking the cash. "That's your mistake." There it was again. That flicker. That moment of something sold too easily. Caleb noticed. He always noticed. "Sir." The voice came from his left. Caleb turned. A woman stood behind a folding table draped in worn cloth, small stacks of knitted scarves and old thermoses arranged with quiet care. She was in her 70s, slight but upright, wrapped in a gray-brown cardigan layered over a faded blouse. A soft wool scarf circled her neck, and her silver hair was tied back loosely, a few strands escaping in the wind. Mabel Quinn. Her hands were thin, veins raised like small rivers beneath the skin, the hands of someone who had spent a lifetime making things to keep others warm. Her eyes studied him carefully. "You bought them?" she asked. Caleb nodded. She glanced once toward Dwayne, then back. "Then don't take the main road out," she said softly. "Why?" Caleb asked. Mabel didn't answer directly. "Some things," she said, voice barely above the wind, "don't like being taken away." Caleb held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned back to the pen. He crouched slowly and unlatched the wire. The metal gave with a dull click. Up close, the mother dog shifted, half a step, no more, placing herself between him and the smallest puppy. Not aggressive, not desperate, protective, measured. Caleb slowed everything down. He turned his shoulders slightly, avoiding direct pressure. Reached back toward the truck, pulled a wooden crate forward, lined it with an old blanket. His movements were deliberate, predictable. One by one, he lifted the puppies. The bold one wriggled weakly. The quiet one barely reacted. The smallest trembled, too light in his hand. The mother watched everything, every breath, every shift, every intention. When he reached for the last puppy, she stepped forward again, not to attack, to decide. Their eyes met. There was no pleading there, only a question. Caleb swallowed. "I'm taking all of you," he said quietly. A long second passed. Then she stepped aside. He finished loading the crate and carried it to the truck. The market resumed around him as if nothing had happened. Voices, footsteps, quiet exchanges. Mabel turned away. Dwayne counted his money again, slower this time. Caleb opened the back door and stepped aside. He didn't pull, didn't call. He waited. The mother approached slowly, paused, touched her nose once to the crate, then jumped in. That was when Caleb knew this wasn't finished. He closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, movements calm, controlled. He started the engine and rolled out onto the dirt road without rushing. In the mirror, a white van, parked at the edge of the lot, engine running. It didn't move forward, didn't disappear, just stayed, like something waiting for the right moment to matter. Caleb kept his speed steady. Beside him, Orion sat still. But the tension in his body had shifted, subtle, controlled, unmistakable. They were being watched. At the bend in the road, Orion turned his head slightly, not toward the van, but toward the abandoned rail yard beyond the trees. And in the back, the mother dog lifted her head too. Same direction, same stillness. Caleb felt it then, cold. Not from the weather, from recognition. He hadn't just taken in a stray, he had taken something from someone who expected it to stay where it was. The road stretched ahead, quiet and empty. Behind him, the van finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, keeping distance. Not chasing, not leaving, just following far enough to be remembered. Caleb tightened his grip on the wheel, just slightly. He had come for hinges, wire, feed. Instead, he had stepped into something unfinished. And somewhere behind him, something had already decided he wasn't allowed to walk away. The house on the hill had never been built for comfort. It stood just beyond the edge of town, where the land flattened into pale winter fields, and the old wooden church leaned quietly into the wind, as if it had grown tired of standing straight. The boards of the house were solid, practical, weather-worn. No decoration, no softness. It was the kind of place a man chose when he wanted distance, not warmth. Caleb Vance stepped inside first. He didn't speak. He didn't rush. He simply moved. At 43, his habits had long ago hardened into instinct. Before anything else, before food, before rest, before even acknowledging what he had brought home, he checked the perimeter, door hinges, window locks, blind angles near the back fence, the narrow strip of land behind the shed where someone could stand unseen. His boots moved quietly across the wooden floor, the rhythm steady, controlled. Behind him, Orion entered like a shadow. The German shepherd's paws made almost no sound. His body stayed low but not fearful, head turning slightly as he mapped the space in ways that had nothing to do with sight alone. He passed the doorway once, then circled back, nose briefly catching the edge of the air near the kitchen before continuing on. Not searching, confirming. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls. Inside, the house held its breath. Caleb opened the back door and set the crate down just inside, leaving space between himself and the threshold. He didn't reach in immediately. He waited. The smallest puppy shifted first, letting out a thin, uncertain whine. The sound seemed too fragile to belong in a place this quiet. Then the others stirred, clumsy movements against the blanket. The mother appeared in the doorway. She didn't step inside. She stood there, framed by the pale light outside, her body angled slightly sideways, not confronting, not retreating, assessing. Up close, her condition was clearer, 5 years old, maybe a little more. Her frame still strong beneath the fatigue, but worn down by repetition. The black saddle of her coat had dulled, the tan along her chest uneven, thinned in places where stress had settled too long. Around her neck, the fur broke awkwardly, the skin beneath hardened, a memory left behind by restraint. Her eyes moved quickly. Door, window, corner, hallway, back again. She wasn't curious. She was mapping exits. Caleb stepped back another half pace, not an invitation, permission. Your call, he said quietly. His voice didn't carry authority, just space. The puppies made the decision for her. One of them, a slightly larger one with a stubborn wobble, pushed itself over the edge of the crate and landed awkwardly on the wooden floor. It froze, then took 2 uncertain steps forward. The mother's head snapped toward it. For a moment, her body tightened. Then she stepped inside. Not trust, not comfort, a calculation. Caleb closed the door slowly behind her. The process that followed was not gentle. It was careful. There was a difference. Caleb moved through the kitchen with the same efficiency he had once used to prepare for operations. Water first, then heat, then space. He filled a metal basin, testing the temperature with his wrist. Set down an old towel, opened a can of broth, mixed it with dry food until it softened. Behind him, the puppies began to explore. The bold one climbed, failed, tried again. The quiet one stayed near the crate, watching. The smallest remained where it was, breathing fast, as if the world still hadn't decided whether to let it exist. Orion positioned himself near the wall, not guarding, observing. The mother stayed close to the doorway. Every time Caleb moved too quickly, her body stiffened, not in aggression, but in something deeper. A reflex that shut everything down at once. Caleb noticed. He slowed. When he knelt to pick up the smallest puppy, his hand paused halfway. Orion stepped forward. Not abruptly, just enough, blocking the motion. Caleb stilled. The dog lowered his head, bringing his nose level with the puppy. He did nothing else. No push, no nudge, just presence. The puppy leaned forward, touched Orion's muzzle, then shifted its weight toward him. Caleb let his hand drop. A breath left him slowly. "Yeah," he murmured. "Not like that." War had taught him how to take control of a moment. Orion had just reminded him how to give it back. By late afternoon, the house had changed. Not louder, not warmer, just occupied. Mabel Quinn arrived just before sunset. She knocked once, softly, then opened the door without waiting for an answer. She carried a cloth bag in one hand and a small container in the other. Up close, the details of her age showed more clearly, fine lines etched deep around her eyes, skin weathered but steady, her posture upright, not from strength, but from refusal to bend to time. "I brought soup," she said simply, "and something softer for them." She stepped inside, her eyes adjusting quickly, taking in everything without appearing to stare, the crate, the bowls, the damp towels, the dogs. When she saw the mother, she stopped. Not dramatically, just enough. Mabel crouched slowly, her movements careful, measured. "That one," she said quietly, "has been taught too many things the hard way." Caleb leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "She'll learn something else," he replied. Mabel didn't look at him. "She will," she said, "but not because you make her." She reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of bread, breaking it into smaller portions. She set it down near the wall, not too close, not too far. The mother didn't move immediately, but her eyes followed the motion. "You gave her a name yet?" Mabel asked. Caleb shook his head. After a moment, he said, "Mara." Mabel smiled faintly. "That fits." She didn't ask why. Some names didn't need explaining. It happened just as the light began to fade. The room had settled into something close to stillness. The quiet hum of the stove, the soft shifting of the puppies, the faint rhythm of Mabel's knitting needles clicking together. Then Orion stood up. No sound. No warning. Just movement. His head turned slowly toward the far wall. Not the window. Not the door. The wall. Mara froze at the exact same moment. Her body lowered slightly, muscles tightening, not in fear of something present, but in recognition of something remembered. Caleb followed their gaze. There was nothing there, just wood, just shadow. But neither dog moved. For a long, suspended second, the air in the room felt wrong. Not dangerous, not yet, but aware. Then, just as quietly, Orion relaxed. Mara followed a heartbeat later. The moment passed, but Caleb didn't forget it. Some instincts didn't react to what was there. They reacted to what had been there before. Night came sharper. The kind of cold that settled into the bones of the house. Caleb stepped outside once more, circling the perimeter again. The wind had shifted. The ground behind the house told the truth. Tire tracks, fresh, deeper than his own. Not old enough to belong to yesterday. Not new enough to still be soft. He crouched, running his fingers along the edge of one mark, clean, deliberate. Someone had come close enough to see, close enough to decide something. He stood there for a long moment, the silence pressing in around him. Then he turned back toward the house. Inside, the light glowed faintly through the window. Small, fragile, alive. When he opened the door, the first thing he noticed was the space. Not what was there, what wasn't. Mara was no longer beside the crate. She stood in the middle of the room, between the back door and the puppies, her body angled toward him, her eyes fixed. Not wild, not panicked, certain. Caleb stepped inside slowly. "What is it?" he asked, though he already knew the answer wasn't something he could hear. Mara didn't move, but something in her gaze had changed. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was memory. The kind that didn't fade with distance. The kind that waited. Caleb closed the door behind him. The house held its quiet again. But it was no longer the same quiet. Not empty. Not peaceful. Watchful. He exhaled slowly and leaned his weight slightly against the door. "They found you before," he said under his breath. Mara didn't blink. And in that stillness, he understood. This hadn't started at the market, and it wasn't going to end here. Morning did not wait for Caleb Vance. He woke before the light had fully settled across the hills, not because of habit alone, but because something in him had refused to rest. The house was quiet, but it was not the kind of quiet that allowed sleep. It was the kind that held on to the edges of the night, where thoughts did not fade. They sharpened. He sat upright in the chair, boots still on, shoulders stiff. Across the room, the puppies slept. Orion was awake. The German shepherd sat near the door, body still, eyes half open, not resting, not fully alert, but suspended somewhere in between, waiting. Mara lay near the crate, her body angled so that she could see both the door and the puppies without moving. Her eyes were open, always open. Caleb watched her for a moment, then stood. "I'm going back," he said quietly. Orion was already on his feet before the words finished. The market was gone. Not packed up, not closing. Gone. The gravel lot stretched empty beneath the pale morning sky. Wind pushing loose dirt across the surface like the memory of movement. No tables, no tarps, no crates, no sign that people had gathered there just hours before. Only tire tracks. And even those were already fading. Caleb stood at the edge of the lot, hands resting loosely at his sides. His posture didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. He had seen this before, not here, not in a place like this. But the pattern was familiar. Temporary presence, controlled disappearance, nothing left behind that could be traced back. Orion moved ahead of him, nose low, tracing the edge of the ground. He didn't circle. He didn't hesitate. He followed. Caleb let him lead. The abandoned rail line cut through the land like an old scar, rusted tracks disappearing into a thin wall of pine trees. A narrow service road ran beside it, uneven and half swallowed by time. Near the signal post, a small house stood alone. It looked like it had been built before the town had decided what it wanted to become. Wooden siding, faded gray. Windows clean, but not new. A small porch that leaned just slightly, not from neglect, but from age. A man stood outside. He had been watching them long before they reached him. Elias Boone, mid-60s, thin to the point of looking brittle, his frame long and narrow like a branch that had refused to break. His face carried deep lines, not from laughter, but from years of squinting into distance. His beard was uneven, gray-white, trimmed without care. His eyes were sharp. Too sharp for someone who claimed to live quietly. "You're early," Elias said. His voice was dry, steady. Caleb stopped a few feet away. "You were expecting me?" he asked. Elias gave a small shrug. "Not you," he said. "Someone like you." He glanced once toward Orion, then back. "Dog's the kind that notices things." Caleb didn't respond. He waited. Elias shifted his weight slightly, resting one hand against the porch railing. "They don't stay long," he said. "Who?" Elias nodded toward the empty lot behind them. "The ones that set up shop out there." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You've seen them before." "Seen enough," Elias replied. His gaze drifted toward the tracks. "Trucks come in late. Not loud, not fast. Just present." He paused. "They don't unload like people do when they're working." Caleb stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Elias looked at him then. Really looked. "They don't take care of anything," he said. "They sort it." The word hung there. Sort. Like objects. Like pieces. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Where?" Elias turned, pointing with his chin toward the line of trees further down the tracks. "Old storage building. Used to be part of the rail system. Been empty for years." He hesitated, then added, "At least that's what it looks like." Caleb nodded once. That was enough. Orion picked up the trail immediately. His body lowered, movements tightening into something more precise. His nose hovered inches above the ground, tracking a scent Caleb couldn't see but trusted without question. They moved along the fence line. The air changed. Subtle. But there. Cleaner. Too clean. Like something had been wiped down, not to remove dirt, but to remove evidence. Orion stopped near a broken section of wire fence. His head tilted slightly. Caleb crouched. There, a thin strip of nylon caught against the edge. Not old, not natural, deliberate. A few feet further, something else. A piece of plastic. Half of it snapped clean. Caleb picked it up, turning it between his fingers. A faded logo, barely visible, but there. Holloway. He didn't say it out loud. Didn't need to. The name settled into place like a piece of something larger he hadn't fully seen yet. Orion stiffened suddenly. Not like before, sharper, faster. His head snapped toward the trees. Then, he stepped directly in front of Caleb. Blocking. Completely. Caleb froze. A second passed. Then a beam of light cut through the trees ahead. Flashlight. Voices. Low. Controlled. The female unit. Low yield. But the line's still viable. "Transport tonight, same route." Caleb didn't move. Didn't breathe. He shifted his weight slowly, stepping back into the shadow of the fence. Orion stayed exactly where he was. Still. Silent. Invisible. For a moment the voices drifted closer. Then away. The light vanished. And just like that, nothing. Caleb exhaled. Slow, measured. He glanced down at Orion. "Good call," he muttered. The dog didn't respond, but his body relaxed half an inch. That was enough. They reached the building just after sunset. It didn't look like much. A long, low structure, metal siding dulled by time, roof patched in uneven sections. No lights, no movement. Just another forgotten piece of infrastructure left behind by something larger. That was the first lie. Caleb approached from the side, keeping his steps light, controlled. The door wasn't locked. That was the second. Inside, the air hit him first. Chemical, sharp, clean in the wrong way, not decay, not neglect, maintenance. The interior told the rest of the story. Cages, empty, plastic bowls overturned, a long metal table with drag marks etched into the surface, a clipboard on the floor, pages torn out. Not random, removed. Caleb moved slowly, scanning everything. This wasn't a place people forgot. This was a place people cleaned. Orion moved ahead, passing the cages without interest. Then he stopped. Corner, half shadow. Caleb followed. Nothing, just a wall. But Orion stayed there, nose lifted slightly, reading something deeper than scent. Caleb didn't question it, not anymore. He left with what he could carry. A few images, a few fragments, a growing understanding. This wasn't small, this wasn't random. This was structured, and worse, it was careful. The drive back felt longer, not because of distance, because of weight. When Caleb pulled up to the house, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The second, movement. Inside. He stepped through the door slowly. The room looked the same. The crate, the blankets, the bowls, the puppies. Mara. But something had changed. She wasn't lying down. She stood, still, watching him. Not wary, not defensive, focused. Caleb set his keys down. "You smell it too," he said quietly. Mara didn't move. But her ears shifted forward. Her nose lifted slightly. Then, she stepped closer, slow, measured, not afraid, not retreating. She stopped just within reach. Caleb didn't move his hand, didn't reach, didn't break the moment. Mara leaned forward. Just enough. Her nose brushed against his sleeve. Then she pulled back. But her eyes stayed. And for the first time, there was no distance in them, no calculation, no question, just something quieter, something heavier. Recognition. Caleb exhaled slowly. "That's right," he murmured. "They're part of this." Mara lowered herself beside the crate. Not guarding, staying. Orion moved to the doorway, settling into position. The house grew still again, but not empty, not fragile, changed. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out the broken piece of plastic. He turned it under the light. The letters clearer now. Holloway. A name. Not a guess anymore. Not a feeling. Something real. Caleb stared at it for a long moment, then closed his hand around it. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The road remained empty, but the sense of distance had disappeared. Whatever this was, it was closer now, and it knew exactly where to find him. The morning carried a different weight, not heavier, clearer. Caleb Vance didn't rush. He moved through the house with the same deliberate rhythm he always had. But something in the way he paused, briefly, almost imperceptibly, suggested the shift had already happened. He was no longer reacting. He was positioning. Orion stayed close as Caleb stepped outside, scanning the yard with quiet precision. The fence line looked unchanged at first glance. The boards were intact, the gates still aligned, the ground undisturbed except for the familiar marks of wind and frost. But Caleb had learned long ago. What mattered rarely announced itself loudly. He crouched near the back fence. There. A streak of paint. Thin, fresh. A dull gray line brushed along the side of one wooden post, barely noticeable unless someone knew exactly what to look for. Not random. Not accidental. A marker. Caleb straightened slowly. "They're tracking," he murmured. Orion didn't move, but his ears angled slightly forward. That was enough. Tessa Vale's office sat above a small hardware store at the edge of town, the kind of place people passed without looking twice. Inside it was chaos. Paper stacked on paper, maps pinned to walls, photographs clipped together in clusters, old articles marked with red pen, notes written in tight, efficient handwriting that left no space for decoration. Tessa stood behind a desk that had long since lost its original surface under the weight of everything. She refused to let go. She was in her mid-30s, lean, sharp-featured, with a face that carried focus more than softness. Her brown hair was tied back loosely, strands falling free as if she had forgotten to care about them hours ago. Her eyes, dark, alert, precise, missed very little. She didn't smile when Caleb walked in, didn't offer a greeting. "You're the one from the market," she said. Not a question, a conclusion. Caleb set the broken plastic piece on the desk. Tessa didn't touch it immediately. She looked at it, then at him, then back again. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Near the rail line," Caleb replied. Tessa picked it up carefully, turned it under the light. The change in her expression was subtle, but real. Not surprise, recognition. "I've been chasing this name for 3 years," she said quietly. She stepped back, reaching for a folder buried under several others. Inside, documents, printouts, handwritten notes. "Holloway Logistics," she said. "Officially? Transportation. Occasional contracts involving trained animals. Security, detection, performance breeding." She flipped to another page. "Unofficially," she paused. "There are gaps." "What kind of gaps?" Caleb asked. Tessa met his eyes. "The kind that don't happen by accident." She moved around the desk, pulling a map from the wall. "Dogs go missing," she said. "Not reported as stolen, not abandoned, just gone." She tapped several points across the map. Then shipments move through areas that don't match the paperwork. Routes that exist for a night, then vanish. Caleb crossed his arms. "And no one stopped it?" Tessa gave a short, humorless breath. "They've tried." She hesitated. "My sister worked with a rescue group 2 towns over." Her voice shifted. Not weaker, just quieter. "She called me once. Said some of the dogs weren't being placed." "Where were they going?" Caleb asked. Tessa shook her head slightly. She didn't get that far. What happened? She stopped talking about it. A pause. Then she left. Caleb didn't ask more. He didn't need to. Some stories didn't end cleanly. They just stopped. The facility sat behind a cold storage complex on the edge of an industrial zone. From the outside, it looked legitimate. Clean fencing, even spacing between structures, signs properly placed. No damage, no neglect. That was the problem. Places that needed to hide something rarely looked broken. They looked perfect. Caleb parked further down the road. Mara stayed behind. He hadn't made the decision lightly, but this wasn't a place for uncertainty. Orion stayed at his side. Tessa moved ahead slightly, camera already in hand. They approached from the rear. No guards, no noise, just stillness. The door opened easily. Inside, order, everything in its place. Cages lined along the walls, each one identical in size and spacing. Stainless steel surfaces wiped to a dull shine. Floors clean enough to reflect the overhead lights. But it wasn't the cleanliness that unsettled Caleb. It was the system, charts, tables, lists. Every cage labeled, not with names, but codes. Tessa moved quickly, photographing everything. Neurological response, she read from one chart. Breathing output. Noise tolerance. Pain resistance. Her voice tightened slightly. These aren't rescue records. Caleb stepped closer. On the wall, a classification board. Rows of identifiers, letters, numbers, each tied to a file. Each file tied to a life. He scanned one entry. Female unit, low yield, line still viable. His jaw clenched. Mara. Not by name, by function, reduced, measured, assigned value. That was how this worked. Not cruelty in the obvious sense. Something colder, cleaner, efficient. Orion froze. Instant. Complete. His body stiffened, head turning toward the far end of the hallway. Not sound, not movement. Something else. Caleb followed his gaze. At the edge of the corridor, a shadow shifted. Then, footsteps, measured, unhurried, not hiding, approaching. Caleb stepped slightly forward, not retreating, not advancing, waiting. The footsteps stopped, then resumed. Closer, closer. And then, a man stepped into the light. Rowan Hale, late 40s, tall, controlled. Every movement deliberate, as if nothing he did was ever wasted. His dark hair was neatly styled, touched with the faintest silver at the temples. His face was clean, angular, composed. No roughness, no visible strain. His coat, charcoal, tailored perfectly, fell straight along his frame. Beneath it, a dark knit layer, gloves in one hand. He looked out of place. Not because he didn't belong, because he belonged too well. His eyes moved over Caleb, then Orion, then Tessa. Taking in details, calculating, no urgency, no surprise. Visitors, he said calmly. His voice was smooth, not warm, not cold, balanced, controlled. Caleb didn't respond. Rowan's gaze shifted slightly. To what do I owe the interest? Tessa lifted her camera slightly. You're running a classification system, she said. Rowan smiled faintly. Everything is classified, he replied. Some things are just done more honestly. Caleb stepped forward. They're not inventory. Rowan's eyes settled on him. No, he said. They're assets. A pause. Underperforming ones are reassigned. Or discarded, Caleb said. Rowan tilted his head slightly. I prefer to think of it as optimization. Silence stretched. Tension, but not explosive. Controlled, like two forces measuring each other before deciding whether conflict was necessary. Then Rowan stepped aside, not blocking, not threatening. You should leave, he said. No edge in his voice, no urgency, just certainty. Tessa hesitated. Caleb didn't. He turned, walked. Orion stayed close. Rowan didn't stop them, didn't follow. That was worse. The drive back was quiet. Tessa stared out the window, her camera resting in her lap. He let us go, she said finally. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. He didn't need to stop us. Tessa frowned slightly. That's not confidence, she said. That's control. Night settled in hard. Colder, sharper. Orion didn't take his usual position. He lay across the back door, blocking it. When Caleb stepped near, the dog's eyes opened immediately. Not relaxed, not at ease, watching. Caleb stepped outside. The air felt thinner, the yard unchanged. Until he reached the fence again. The mark. But not alone. A second one. Lower. more precise, almost invisible, a confirmation. Caleb stood still. "They've been here again," he said quietly. Behind him, the house remained lit. Inside, Mara didn't sleep. She sat near the puppies, not guarding, waiting. And for the first time, she didn't look afraid. She looked certain. Caleb turned back toward the house slowly. The distance between them had closed, not because he found them, because they had already found him. The days that followed did not rush. They unfolded slowly, like frost melting under a hesitant sun, never fully gone, just softened enough to let something else exist beside it. Caleb Vance noticed the change before he allowed himself to believe in it. The house no longer felt empty. It breathed, not loudly, not warmly, but with presence. The puppies had grown steadier, not strong, not yet, but certain enough to move without questioning every step. The bold one, restless, always pushing forward, had earned a name first. "Rook," Caleb had said, watching the way the small body kept trying again, even after falling. The quieter one, observant and patient, became Ash. And the smallest, Pip. The name came out of him without thought, soft and short, like something that might disappear if held too tightly. Mabel Quinn approved of the names without comment. She had started bringing yarn, not new, not perfect. Old threads pulled from forgotten sweaters, repurposed into small, uneven scarves. Each one different, each one warm. She worked in silence most of the time, her knitting needles clicking in a slow rhythm that filled the house without asking for attention. "These aren't for comfort," she said once, handing Caleb a finished piece. "They're for permission." Caleb didn't ask what she meant. He was starting to understand. Tessa moved differently now. Less like someone searching, more like someone building. She had begun tracing vehicle records, plate numbers, shipment logs, patterns that didn't line up but repeated often enough to matter. Papers spread across her desk like fragments of a larger picture. Sheriff Nolan Pierce joined them carefully. He was a man in his early 50s, broad through the shoulders, his frame still strong despite years of work wearing it down. His face carried the kind of lines that came not from age alone, but from decisions made too often without good options. His hair had gone mostly gray, cut short, practical. His eyes were steady, but not untouched. He didn't trust quickly, didn't act fast. But when he committed, he stayed. "I can't shut them down yet," Nolan had said, standing in Caleb's kitchen, his voice low, measured. Too clean on paper. Too many gaps. "But you can help," Tessa replied. Nolan nodded once. "I can watch." That was enough. For a while, it almost felt like something fragile was taking shape. Mara began to shift. Not fully, not safely, but enough to be seen. There were moments, small, fleeting, when she didn't step back when Caleb passed too close. Moments when she stayed by the bowl instead of waiting for him to leave before eating. And once, just once, her tail moved. A single motion, uncertain, but real. Caleb had looked away immediately. Some things broke if you looked at them too directly, but healing was not a straight path. It never was. There were setbacks, sudden ones. A distant engine on the road could send Mara's body low to the ground, her muscles locking as if pulled backward into something she couldn't escape. The faint smell of disinfectant on Caleb's jacket, brought back from one of his investigations, was enough to make her abandon food entirely. She wasn't forgetting. She was learning to carry it. There was a difference. The rain came late that night, cold, steady, the kind that soaked into everything without asking permission. Caleb had just finished reinforcing a section of the fence when Orion moved. Not a full alert. Not yet. A shift, subtle. The dog's head lifted slightly, ears angling toward the far edge of the yard. Caleb noticed. Of course he did. But there was nothing. No sound. No movement. Just rain. Orion hesitated. Then he moved away, not far, just enough, toward the old shed near the edge of the property. Caleb frowned slightly. That wasn't like him. Orion didn't leave position without reason. It happened in the space of seconds. No warning. No build-up. Just wrong. Caleb felt it before he heard it. A silence where there shouldn't have been one. The kind that pressed against the edges of sound, bending it just slightly out of place. He turned. The yard looked the same. The fence, the rain, the dim outline of the shed. But Orion wasn't where he should be. Caleb stepped forward. Mara! Too late. The realization hit like a strike. Not noise, not chaos. Absence. He ran. The back of the house came into view in sharp, broken fragments. Wood, shadow, movement that didn't belong. Mara was already there. Not standing, not guarding, moving. Too fast, too erratic. Her body cut tight circles into the wet ground, nose low, sweeping desperately, her breathing sharp and uneven. Rook and Ash pressed themselves against the side of the crate, small bodies trembling, silent. Caleb dropped to one knee, scanning everything at once. The fence. There. A section near the corner, cut clean. Not broken, not forced, opened. He moved closer. The smell hit him immediately. Chemical, sharp, familiar, gas. Light enough not to leave residue, strong enough to disorient. His jaw tightened. Orion returned at that exact moment. The dog didn't run, didn't panic. He moved straight to the opening, nose dropping low, tracing the edge with precise, controlled breaths. Then he stopped, turned, blocked the gate. His body aligned with the direction of the old railroad. Caleb understood. Not because Orion told him, because he knew the pattern now. Mabel arrived before anyone called her. Rain soaked into her coat, her gray hair damp against her temples, but her hands were steady. She held a folded piece of paper. "This was at the church," she said quietly. Caleb took it, opened it. Simple, clean, no signature. Return the mother. Take back the small one. Tessa arrived moments later, breath quick, eyes sharp. Nolan followed, slower, already reading the ground, the space, the angles. "They planned this," Nolan said. "Not random." Caleb didn't respond. He was still looking at the gap. No blood, no struggle. Just precision. That was worse. Behind him, Mara's movement slowed. Not because she calmed. Because she was breaking. She stopped near him, her body trembling, her eyes searching his face. Not for safety, not for direction, for something else. An answer. Caleb looked down at her. For a moment. Just a moment. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Recognition. He had seen this before. Different place. Different life. Same feeling. A life taken not by chaos, but by design. They gathered inside. Rain against the windows. Silence in the room. Tessa paced. "We expose this now," she said. "We release everything." Nolan shook his head. "Not enough evidence to shut it down. You push now, they disappear again, and the dog disappears with them." Tessa stopped. "That's not an option." "It's the only one we have," Nolan replied. Mabel sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "Saving something," she said softly, "isn't always about moving first." Caleb sat at the table, the paper in front of him, his hands still. Too still. Mara lay at his feet, not moving, not searching anymore, waiting. He looked at her, really looked. And something old opened inside him. A memory, a weight, a version of himself he had buried carefully, deliberately. The man who didn't hesitate. The man who didn't ask permission. The man who finished things. Outside, the rain slowed. Orion stood near the door again, still, watching. But when Caleb stepped toward him, the dog turned, not toward the rail line, not toward the trail, toward him, direct, unbroken, waiting. Not for command, for decision. Caleb stopped. The room held its breath. Behind him, Tessa didn't move. Nolan didn't speak. Mabel closed her eyes briefly. Mara shifted slightly at his feet. And Orion stayed, watching him. Not the enemy, not the path. Him. Caleb exhaled slowly. The weight settled, not lifted, never lifted, but placed, exactly where it belonged. He wasn't just being pulled into something, he had been chosen by it. And now, he had to choose back. The plan did not begin with hope. It began with time. Caleb Vance stood over the kitchen table, the map spread flat beneath his hands. The paper had been marked and remarked so many times that the ink bled into itself. Routes, estimates, guesses layered into something that now resembled certainty more than speculation. Tessa stood across from him, one hand braced against the edge of the table, the other holding a pen she hadn't realized she'd stopped using minutes ago. Her eyes tracked every line like they might move if she looked away too long. Nolan Pierce leaned back near the doorway, arms crossed, his posture heavy with the weight of decisions that never came clean. "They won't move it randomly," Caleb said. His voice was quiet, steady. "They've got a system. That means timing." Tessa nodded. "I pulled the last 3 transport gaps," she said, flipping a page. "They all line up with pre-dawn departures. Always the same pattern. Hold, consolidate, then move." Nolan exhaled slowly. "So the dog stays local until then?" Caleb's eyes didn't leave the map. "Yes. A beat, which means we still have time. Not much, but enough." The plan divided itself naturally. Nolan would hold the main road, using what little official support he could trust without alerting the wrong people. Tessa would take the ridge above the old steel bridge, camera ready, capturing everything that could not be erased once it existed. Caleb and Orion would move along the rail line. Quiet, close, fast enough to matter. Mara was not supposed to come. Caleb made that decision before anyone else could question it. "You stay," he said, crouching in front of her. His voice carried no command, just intention. Mara watched him. Her body still carried the tension of something that had never fully released her. But her eyes? Her eyes held something else now. Not trust, not fully, but awareness. Caleb stood, turned, walked. Orion followed. They hadn't made it halfway through the tree line before Orion stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Completely. Caleb took one more step before he felt it. The resistance behind him. He turned. "Move," he said quietly. Orion didn't. The dog's body remained locked in place. His head turned slightly, not toward the tracks, but deeper into the forest. Caleb's jaw tightened. That was not disobedience. That was judgment. "Orion," he said again. Still nothing. Then, the dog looked at him, not waiting for a command, asking for a decision. Caleb exhaled once, short, controlled. Then he turned, followed. They found her less than 2 minutes later. Mara moved through the trees like something that no longer belonged to fear. Her body stayed low, her movements precise, nose tracing a path only she could read. She didn't hesitate, didn't look back. She had chosen. Caleb stopped, watched her for a moment, then nodded once. "All right," he said. "No more arguments." The bridge rose out of the mist like something forgotten by time. Steel beams stretched across the narrow canyon, their surfaces slick with condensation and years of exposure. The structure groaned softly under the pressure of wind moving through it, a low metallic sound that carried across the distance like something breathing. The rail car sat halfway across, not attached, not moving, waiting. That was how this system worked. Not chaos, precision. Caleb approached from below, moving along the support beams until he reached the base of the structure. Orion stayed close, every movement measured, every step placed with care. Mara followed behind them, not leading, not trailing, present. Inside the rail car, it was colder, controlled. The air sharp with chemicals and metal. Transport cages lined the interior, secured tightly, each one labeled with codes instead of names. Some were empty, some were not. Caleb moved fast, efficient, no wasted motion. There, a smaller crate. Vent holes cut clean. Inside, Pip. The puppy trembled, body curled tight against itself, breathing shallow, eyes wide but unfocused. Alive. Caleb's chest tightened. He knelt, slowly, carefully. He didn't reach immediately. He placed his hand near the opening first. Waited. Pip's nose twitched, then moved. Toward him. That was enough. Caleb lifted the small body into his hands, supporting it fully, keeping it close without pressure. "I've got you," he said quietly. Not a promise, a fact. Mara stepped forward, low, measured. She stopped beside Caleb, her body trembling, not from fear, from recognition. Her eyes locked onto something behind him. Not Pip, not Orion, something else. Caleb turned and saw him. Rowan Hale stepped into the doorway of the rail car like he had been expected. No rush, no tension. His coat remained clean despite the damp air, his posture unchanged, his expression untouched by urgency. Two men stood behind him. Not reckless, not loud, controlled. Everything about them matched the system they served. Rowan's eyes moved across the scene. Caleb, Orion, Pip, then Mara. Something shifted there, small but real. Recognition. "Interesting," Rowan said softly. His voice carried no anger, no threat, just observation. "You weren't meant to get this far." Caleb stood slowly, Pip secured in one arm. "We're done here." Rowan tilted his head slightly. "No," he said. "You interrupted a process." The word hung there. Process. Like nothing in the room was alive. The first move came fast. One of the men stepped forward, not hesitating, not shouting, just action. Caleb reacted instinctively, too late to avoid contact. The impact drove into his shoulder, slamming him against the steel beam behind him. Pain shot through his ribs, sharp enough to steal breath for a fraction of a second. Enough. Pip slipped. Not far, but enough. The small body shifted dangerously close to the open gap between the rail floor and the steel frame. Caleb's hand snapped down, caught him, barely. Orion moved at the same moment. Not toward the man, toward the space. Blocking, intercepting. A second strike hit him hard in the chest, sending the dog sliding across the wet metal surface. He didn't fall, didn't retreat. He held. Caleb pulled Pip back in, securing him fully this time. Pain burned through his side, ignored, irrelevant. And then, Mara moved. Not wild, not frantic. She stepped forward, placed herself between Caleb and Rowan, her body low, but not in submission, in decision. Rowan spoke. Just one word, soft, familiar, a tone that belonged to a different time. Mara's body reacted instantly. A shift, a hesitation, the past reaching forward. Caleb saw it, felt it. The moment where something could break, and then it didn't. Mara took one step back. Not away, forward, toward Caleb, toward Pip, toward the present. Her body steadied. Her stance changed. Not fear, not memory. Choice. Orion rose beside her. Caleb adjusted his footing. Pain still there, ignored. Behind them, voices, louder now, closer. Nolan, Tessa. Movement from both ends of the bridge. The system breaking under pressure it had not planned for. Rowan's expression shifted. Not panic. Something sharper. Calculation failing. He stepped back. Not defeated. Not yet. Take it, he said quietly. But understand. He paused. Just long enough. This doesn't end here. The bridge held the moment. Metal, wind, breath, life. Caleb stepped past him. Didn't respond. Didn't look back. Orion followed. Mara stayed close, not behind, beside. Spring did not arrive like a victory. It came the way mercy sometimes does. Quietly, almost shy, asking for no ceremony. The snow withdrew in uneven patches from the ground around Caleb Vance's house, leaving dark, wet soil beneath, as if the earth itself had been holding its breath all winter and had finally decided to risk breathing again. The wind lost some of its cruelty. The sky, once hard and colorless, began to soften at the edges. Nothing about that softness erased what had happened, but it changed the way the light fell on it. In the days after the steel bridge, the town shifted in small, careful ways. A transport note had been sealed. Boxes of files had been taken. A handful of shipments had been stopped and checked instead of waved through. Tessa Vale published her story in the local paper, then in regional outlets beyond the county. She wrote the way she always had, lean, clean, and unsparing. No melodrama, no righteous shouting, just names, dates, records, photographs, and enough proof to make denial look like cowardice. Holloway's name was no longer polished in people's mouths. That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. Sheriff Nolan Pierce came by 2 days after the article ran, mud on his boots and exhaustion settled deep around his eyes. He stood on the porch with his hat in one hand, broad shoulders hunched slightly beneath his sheriff jacket, looking like a man who had spent half his life carrying rules heavier than his own body. "We got one storage account frozen," he said. 2 out-of-county investigators asked for copies of the bridge footage. 1 former driver finally agreed to talk. Caleb leaned against the porch rail, one hand resting near the old scarred wood. "And the rest?" Nolan gave the kind of smile that had no happiness in it. "The rest learned to run faster." He looked out over the yard where Orion was moving along the fence line in a slow patrol, while Pip stumbled after Rook and Ash with reckless joy. "One door closed," Nolan said. "That doesn't mean the whole building came down." Caleb nodded once. He had never expected a clean ending. Men like Rowan Hale did not build one ugly room. They built corridors, systems, hallways that kept going after the lights went out. Still, one room full of darkness had been opened to daylight. That too mattered. Inside the house, life had begun to gather in layers. Mabel Quinn came often now, sometimes with bread, sometimes with soup, sometimes with nothing more than a canvas bag of old yarn and the patient hands to turn it into warmth. In the afternoons, she sat near the window where the spring light came in soft and pale, her silver-white hair pinned back loosely, her cardigan sleeves pushed just high enough to keep from tangling in her knitting. Her hands were thin, blue-veined, and tireless. She had made scarves for Rook first, then Ash, then Pip. Rook's was crooked because he refused to stay still. Ash's sat neatly around his neck like he had been born understanding ceremony. Pips looked too big for him at first, then somehow exactly right as he grew. Finally, Mabel made one for Orion. The K9 regarded the knitted thing with visible suspicion. "He thinks it insults his profession," Mabel said dryly. Caleb, kneeling by the doorway while tightening a hinge he had finally gotten around to replacing, let one corner of his mouth move. "He's probably right." Mabel looked down at Orion, who stood still, with a scarf draped over his neck, as though enduring something beneath his dignity for the sake of peace. "Dignity is just stubbornness with better posture," she said. That earned a quiet breath of laughter from Caleb. Brief, almost surprised, as if the sound had come from another man still living somewhere inside him. That was changing too. Not in dramatic ways. He still woke too early, still checked the yard before he poured coffee, still paused when trucks passed too slowly on the road below the hill. But the hard emptiness that had once filled the house around him had begun to lose ground. He no longer moved like a man dragging himself through a life he had outlasted. He moved like someone building something. Not large, not perfect, but real. He rebuilt the fence line first, replacing the marked post, then the warped sections, then the gate itself. He set deeper hinges, added stronger latchwork, extended the side enclosure into a proper run. He built low wooden shelters near the back for the dogs brought in after the bridge raid. Thin, frightened creatures with cautious eyes and bodies that knew too much about confinement. One of them, an older shepherd mix with a torn ear and a limp in the left leg, took 3 full days before he would drink while a human remained in sight. Another, a young female with a coat the color of storm clouds, barked in her sleep, but never while awake. Caleb did not try to fix them quickly. He gave them structure, food, routine, quiet, and distance where distance was needed. He was learning that salvation was not a dramatic act. Sometimes it was a gate that stayed open. Sometimes it was a bowl placed down and left alone. Sometimes it was the absence of force. Mara understood that before anyone else. Her healing did not move in a straight line. There were nights when a loud engine on the county road sent her awake so violently that her whole body tightened before her mind could catch up. Sometimes, if Caleb crossed behind her too quickly while carrying feed or tools, she flinched hard enough to knock over a bowl. Once, the faint smell of industrial disinfectant on Tessa's jacket after a courthouse visit made Mara back all the way into the kitchen corner, eyes wide, throat working silently. But now, after those moments, she came back. That was the difference. She knew the route back to herself, to the crate near the stove that had become a bed instead of a trap, to the back door that opened onto wet grass and sunlight instead of concrete and bars, to the hand that could touch her neck gently, check the roughened skin there, and never close into a grip. One afternoon, Caleb sat on the back steps with a sanding block in one hand and a length of wood across his knees. He was shaping the final board for the front gate sign. The air smelled of damp soil and pine. Pip tore across the yard in uneven bursts, ears flopping, chased by Rook, while Ash shadowed them with careful dignity a few paces behind. Mara lay beneath the steps at first, watching. Then Pip tumbled too hard, rolling onto his side with a squeak that made Caleb look up sharply. Before he could move, Mara was there. She crossed the yard in 3 fast strides, lowered her head, and nudged Pip once. Firm, checking, not frantic. Pip sprang back up, offended by gravity, and bit at her scarf fringe. Mara froze for a second. Then, very slowly, her tail moved. Not a twitch, not uncertainty, a real motion. Caleb looked down at the wood in his lap instead of staring at her. Respect had many forms. Sometimes it was pretending not to witness a miracle too closely. Later that same afternoon, Tessa arrived carrying a cardboard records box full of copied filings and handwritten notes. She climbed the porch steps in her dark parka, hair escaping its tie, eyes tired but alive. "I found 3 more connected facilities," she said, setting the box down. "Not enough for warrants yet, but enough to prove the bridge wasn't isolated." Caleb nodded, then glanced toward the yard. Mara was standing near the gate, facing the road. Not stiff, not afraid, still. Tessa followed his gaze. "What is it?" Before Caleb could answer, Pip ran straight up to Mara's front legs and sat down, leaning lightly against one of them, as if her stillness itself was shelter. Mara never looked away from the road, but she lowered her head just enough to touch the top of Pip's back. For one suspended second, the picture held. Mother, child, open yard, no chains anywhere. Tessa's voice came out softer than usual. "She knows," she said. "Knows what?" Caleb asked. "That this place is hers to watch now." The moment passed. Pip bounced away after Rook. Mara followed at a walk. But the feeling lingered. Not everything that survives remains broken in the same shape. By early evening, the sign was ready. Caleb carried it to the gate and fastened it carefully across the new boards. The letters were carved deep by hand, not elegant, but certain. No soul is worthless just because someone priced it wrong. He stepped back to look at it. The line was simple, plain enough to be dismissed by people who mistook simplicity for sentiment. But he knew better. Every word in it had weight. Every word had been paid for. Mabel came to stand beside him without making much sound. Her scarf fluttered faintly in the softer wind. For a while, she said nothing. She only looked at the sign, then at the yard beyond it, where Orion circled once and settled near the gate as if approving the final position. At last she said, "Lately I've been wondering if healing is just memory learning a new address." Caleb kept his eyes on the sign. "Maybe." Mabel turned her head slightly toward him. "No," she said. "Not maybe." A pause. "Last time you told yourself you arrived too late. I think you carried that lie longer than you carried the war." The words landed without gentleness, which was why they worked. Caleb's throat tightened once, almost imperceptibly. He had not told her much. But people who had spent years stitching wounds did not need every story explained to see where the blood had come from. He looked across the yard. Mara was near the back fence now, not hiding at it, simply existing beside it. Orion had paused nearby. Pip was trying to climb onto Ash, while Rook attacked a dead leaf with the seriousness of a soldier breaching enemy lines. Caleb let out a slow breath. "I couldn't change what happened then," he said. Mabel nodded. "No one can." He looked at Mara again, at Pip, at Orion, who had never left him, even when leaving would have been easier, at the gate that now stood stronger than before. "But I could do this," he said. Mabel's eyes softened. "Yes," she replied. "And sometimes this is the only way a soul gets brought back, piece by piece, in the life that comes after the one that broke it." Dusk came gradually, painting the yard in gold instead of steel. The church bell did not ring, but its silence no longer felt like emptiness. The house on the hill, once chosen for distance, now held voices, pause, movement, knitting, papers, tools, and the stubborn evidence of second chances. As the last light stretched long across the ground, Orion stopped. He stood in the middle of the yard, body still, head raised toward the far tree line where the pines thickened into shadow. Caleb looked up instinctively. There was nothing there. No truck, no movement, only wind in the branches, and far beyond it, the faint iron murmur of the old rail line. Caleb stepped beside Orion and rested one hand lightly on the dog's shoulder. Not because there was danger he could see, because some kinds of vigilance were not fear anymore. They were remembrance, shaped into care. Outside the hill, the dark still existed. It always would. But here, at least, no one was turning away from it now. And sometimes, Caleb thought, that was how a place became worth calling home. In the quiet corners of this story, there is a truth that does not arrive with noise, but stays long after everything else fades. Sometimes, what we call coincidence is something far greater. A meeting at the right moment. A life crossing another life exactly when it matters. A broken soul finding its way back. Not through force, but through patience, kindness, and the courage of someone who chooses not to walk away. Maybe that is how God works. Not always through grand miracles that shake the world, but through small, unseen acts of love. Through people who stop when others pass by. Through those who care when it would be easier not to. Through moments where we are given a choice and choose compassion anyway. In our daily lives, we may not stand on a cold bridge or rescue a life in danger, but we all face moments where someone needs understanding, where someone feels forgotten, where a quiet act of kindness can change everything. And in those moments, we are given a chance to become part of something greater than ourselves. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need hope today. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what part of this story stayed with you the most. And if you believe in stories of faith, second chances, and the quiet strength of love, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journey. May God bless you and keep you safe. May He bring peace to your home, strength to your heart, and light to your path. And may He guide you to be the reason someone else believes they still matter.